She called the sheriff on me before I even stepped out of my truck. And I could hear her voice echoing across my own mountain property, like she owned every tree on it. "He's trespassing." "He broke into the house," she shouted, pointing straight at me while standing on my porch, wrapped in my blanket, holding my coffee mug. I didn't say a word at first. The cold wind rolled down the hill, carrying the smell of pine and smoke from the fireplace inside. My fireplace. I had been gone for 3 weeks, working overtime shifts after the storm-damaged job in town. This mountain house was my quiet place, the one thing I bought after years of saving. No neighbors, no noise, just trees and the long dirt road that twisted up the ridge like a snake. Or at least that's what I thought. Her name was Linda, the HOA president from the subdivision down the valley. The same woman who once told me my mailbox color was aggressive. The problem was, my house wasn't even in her HOA. It sat outside their boundary line by almost half a mile. I made sure of that when I bought it. But Linda never cared much about lines on maps. She cared about control. And right now, she stood there like she had won something, arms crossed, chin high, acting like she'd been living here forever. "You left this place abandoned," she snapped as I walked closer. "Community rules allow temporary use of empty properties for safety monitoring." I blinked. "Safety monitoring? With my furniture moved around?" She smirked. "You should be grateful someone kept an eye on it." That's when I noticed the tire tracks. Not just one car, several. Fresh footprints in the frost. My porch chairs rearranged. And through the open window behind her, I saw strangers moving inside my living room like they were unpacking groceries. My stomach dropped hard. I felt that quiet anger. The kind that doesn't explode but sits heavy in your chest. A county patrol truck slowly climbed the dirt road behind me. Linda's smile widened like she had been waiting for an audience. The deputy stepped out, adjusting his hat, clearly confused by the scene in front of him. Linda rushed toward him before I could speak. "Officer, this man broke into our secured property. We've been maintaining it under HOA supervision." The deputy looked at me. I just pulled my keys from my pocket and pressed the garage opener. The door rumbled open behind Linda, revealing my truck's spare parts, my fishing gear, and the giant family photo mounted on the back wall and me and my daughter standing in front of this very house on closing day. Linda's smile flickered, just for a second, but she recovered fast. "That proves nothing," she said quickly. "He could have staged that." I almost laughed. But then I saw something that changed everything. Hanging from the inside coat rack right near the door was a laminated tag, an HOA inspection badge with Linda's photo on it. And below it, a temporary occupancy notice stamped with a date from last week. A notice I had never seen. A notice claiming this property was under HOA protective custody. The deputy frowned, scratching his jaw. "Ma'am, this address isn't listed in your HOA jurisdiction." Linda's voice sharpened. "That's being reviewed." Behind her, one of the strangers, inside, stepped onto the porch carrying my toolbox like it belonged to him. That was the moment the anger turned into something colder. Not shouting anger, thinking anger, because I suddenly understood what she thought this was. She believed I was just some quiet guy with a remote house nobody would defend, someone easy to push out. I slowly walked past her, stepping onto my porch while the deputy watched carefully. Linda's voice rose again, louder, desperate to hold control. "If you go inside, you'll be trespassing on HOA-managed property." I stopped at my front door, hand resting on the frame where my daughter had carved her initials. I turned back to Linda and said calmly, "You picked the worst house on this mountain to steal." She laughed like I had made a joke. But deep down, I could see a tiny crack forming in her confidence. Because what she didn't know yet, what nobody standing there knew, was that this house wasn't empty for 3 weeks, and I had proof of every single minute she spent inside it. Linda's laugh faded when she saw me reach into the wooden planter beside the door. I lifted the small black device hidden under the soil. A weatherproof camera no bigger than a thumb. The blinking green light reflected in her eyes before she could look away. "Storm season," I said quietly. I installed a full system before I left. Solar-powered, cloud storage, motion alerts. The deputy's eyebrows went up. Linda didn't speak, but her jaw tightened like she had just swallowed something bitter. Inside the house, the man holding my toolbox froze halfway down the porch steps. Another woman peeked from behind the curtain, suddenly unsure if she should still be there. I pulled out my phone and tapped the app. Clips loaded instantly, timestamps, faces, vehicles, license plates. Linda unlocking my door with bolt cutters. Linda directing movers. Linda pouring herself coffee while sitting in my chair like she owned the sunrise. The deputy leaned closer to my screen, his expression shifting from confusion to concern. "That's pretty clear," he muttered. Linda clapped her hands once, sharp and loud like she could reset the moment. "This is harassment. We were securing an abandoned structure after storm damage reports." I tilted my head. "Storm damage? You mean the perfectly intact house with working utilities you broke into?" Her eyes darted toward the strangers behind her, silently ordering them to stay calm. But I wasn't done noticing things. The driveway held 3 unfamiliar SUVs, all parked in a line facing downhill. Packed full, suitcases visible through the windows, coolers, kids' bikes strapped to the back. This wasn't monitoring. This was a full move-in, a vacation takeover. Maybe even worse. My quiet mountain house had become someone's free rental. The deputy radioed something softly, stepping a few feet away. Linda watched him go, then turned back to me with a different tone, lower, almost pleading but still wrapped in pride. "Look, these families needed a temporary place. The HOA board approved it. We planned to contact you." I smiled slightly. "You never planned to contact me?" Silence answered. A gust of wind slammed the garage door halfway shut behind us, making everyone jump. The sound echoed down the empty valley like a warning. I could feel eyes on me from every direction now. The strangers, the deputy, Linda, waiting to see what I'd do next. And that's when my phone buzzed again. Not from the camera app, but from my neighbor Rick down the ridge. A message with one photo. I opened it and felt my chest tighten. The photo showed Linda standing at the locked gate at the base of the mountain road. Earlier that morning, talking to a tow truck driver. My gate, the only road access. The caption Rick sent was simple. "Why is HOA lady asking how to lock this gate permanently?" I lifted my gaze slowly back to Linda. She didn't know I had seen it yet. She stood there pretending calm, arms folded, chin high. But the confidence wasn't the same anymore. "You were planning something else," I said quietly. Linda's smile returned, thinner this time. "You don't understand mountain safety procedures." But I did understand something very clearly in that moment. The road winding down this ridge had one entrance and one exit. No alternate path, no back trail wide enough for vehicles, just that single metal gate at the bottom. And suddenly all those SUVs parked facing downhill looked less like convenience and more like preparation, because Linda hadn't just taken my house. She had planned to make sure I couldn't get back to it at all. I stared at Linda for a long second, letting the silence sit between us like fog rolling through the trees. She kept that thin smile on her face, but her fingers were tapping against her arm, fast, nervous. The deputy finished his radio call and walked back, his boots crunching on the gravel. "Backup's on the way," he said calmly. "Until then, nobody moves property in or out." Nobody moved, but everyone looked at Linda. She turned toward the strangers on my porch. "It's fine," she said loudly. "Just a misunderstanding." But her voice didn't carry the same authority anymore. The man with my toolbox slowly set it down near the door like it had burned his hands. I slipped my phone into my pocket and stepped off the porch, walking past Linda toward the edge of the driveway where the mountain road disappeared between tall pines. The sun was dipping lower, shadows stretching across the valley. I could almost picture that metal gate at the bottom. The one I installed after a group of hunters accidentally drove up here last winter. A heavy ranch gate with a coded lock only 2 people knew. Me and Rick. Or at least, that's what I thought. "You planning to leave already?" Linda called after me, trying to sound sarcastic. I shook my head slightly. "Just thinking about your morning visit to my gate." Her posture stiffened. The deputy looked between us. "Gate?" I pulled out my phone again and showed him Rick's photo. The tow truck. Linda standing beside it, pointing at the lock like she was discussing hardware specs. The deputy's mouth pressed into a line. "Ma'am, were you attempting to restrict access to this property?" Linda laughed, but it sounded forced. "Of course not. I was asking about emergency vehicle clearance." But her eyes betrayed her. They flicked toward the parked SUVs again, then back to me. And suddenly I understood the full picture. She hadn't just planned to squat. She planned to control the access, turn this mountain house into a private, HOA getaway, a place where nobody could drive up without her say-so. A quiet anger settled deeper in my chest. One of the strangers, a woman holding a toddler, stepped forward hesitantly. "Linda, you told us this was approved." Linda didn't answer. She kept staring at me. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small metal remote. Not flashy, just a single button. I rolled it between my fingers while looking straight at her. "You know what the funny part is?" I said. Nobody spoke. "That gate you were asking about this morning?" I pressed the button. Far down the mountain, barely audible through the trees, came the deep mechanical clang of steel locking into place. It echoed up the ridge like thunder traveling through metal. Linda's head snapped toward the road. I met her gaze calmly. "It auto-locks at sunset," the strangers murmured behind her. Someone walked quickly to one of the SUVs and tried the ignition like they might race downhill. Linda took a step toward me, her composure cracking. "You can't trap people up here." I raised an eyebrow. "Trap?" I thought this was HOA-managed property. The deputy exhaled slowly, realizing what was happening. The sun slipped lower, painting the sky orange behind Linda's shoulder. The road was now officially closed, locked from the outside with a code she didn't have. And that's when Linda made her biggest mistake yet. She pulled out her phone and dialed someone, not emergency services, not HOA board members, but someone she clearly expected to fix this fast. I watched her face as the call connected, her voice dropping to a whisper I could barely hear. "Yeah, we've got a problem. He's here. And the gate is locked." She paused, listening. Then her expression changed completely. Not anger, not confidence, worry. She slowly lowered the phone, eyes widening as she looked back at me. Because whatever voice answered her call had just told her something she didn't expect about me. Linda stood frozen for a moment, phone still in her hand like it suddenly weighed too much to hold. The confidence she had been wearing all afternoon slipped right off her face. The deputy noticed it too. "Ma'am?" he asked gently. She didn't answer him. She just kept staring at me like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She had walked into blind. One of the SUVs started its engine anyway, the driver clearly hoping momentum could beat a locked gate. Gravel sprayed as the tires turned, but the deputy raised his hand. "Sir, vehicle stays parked." The engine shut off again, leaving only the sound of wind moving through pine branches. Linda finally spoke, but her voice had changed. Softer, careful. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" I shrugged. "You never asked." The truth was I liked living quietly. After 15 years working disaster recovery contracts across different states, I got used to being the guy nobody noticed. Fixing things, securing sites, documenting damage. Cameras, access control, property security, it was second nature to me. This mountain house wasn't just a vacation spot. It was my reset button, the one place I didn't want strangers making decisions for me. Backup sirens echoed faintly from down in the valley, winding closer along the dirt road until they stopped at the locked gate below. Linda heard them too. Her shoulders dropped. The deputy's radio crackled. He stepped aside, listening, then looked back at us. "Additional units are at the base. They can't get through until the gate's opened." Linda turned sharply toward me. "Open it." I didn't move. "You first." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said calmly, "you explain why you broke into a property outside your HOA, moved people in, and tried to secure the only road without the owner knowing." Silence stretched again. The strangers on my porch shifted uncomfortably, whispering among themselves. The woman with the toddler looked close to tears. "Linda, what's happening?" she asked. Linda inhaled slowly like she was preparing to give another speech. But before she could, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Rick. It was a notification from the county property database app I rarely used. A change alert. I frowned and opened it. The screen loaded, and for a second I thought it was a glitch. A document had been filed yesterday, a temporary occupancy claim attached to my parcel number, filed under Linda's name. My chest went cold. She hadn't just squatted physically. She had started paperwork. I looked up at her, holding the phone so she could see the screen. Her lips parted slightly, caught between denial and panic. "You filed a claim on my house?" I asked quietly. Linda swallowed. It's a provisional caretaker filing. The deputy stepped closer, peering at the screen. His expression hardened. Ma'am, this is a legal declaration of vacant property management. Behind Linda, one of the strangers whispered, You said this was cleared. This was cleared? The sound of another engine echoed faintly, not from below, but from somewhere up the ridge behind the trees. Everyone turned instinctively toward the noise. Headlights flickered between branches where no road should have been. Rick's old ATV burst into view along a narrow service trail, bouncing over rocks until it stopped beside us. Rick pulled off his helmet, breathing hard. Sorry I'm late, he said to me, then glanced at Linda. But you might want to know. He pointed down toward the valley where red and blue lights glowed near the locked gate. That tow truck she called earlier? Rick said. It's back. And this time, it ain't empty. Linda's face drained of color. Because whatever was sitting on that tow truck now was meant for my property. End the story.